Always have a song stuck in your head or always forget the lyrics to your favorite songs.
So one of these actually just describes my life. Actually, these both describe my life. These are both true. Like I have a band that I listen to and have listened to for 10 plus years. I listen to their whole discography maybe every 2 months, and I would know half of their lyrics, maybe not even that. Lyrics just for whatever reason do not stick with me. They do not impact me, which was probably good during my teenage years, listening to all that emo music that I listened to, and I wasn't impacted too much by all the emo, depressing vibes. So that's a good thing. And regarding songs in my head, I'm always tapping away a beat, and usually that will come from a song that's in my head, or sometimes just a made up rhythm, which probably is quite annoying for other people, like me tapping my foot or tapping the table and stuff. So that's kind of my life already. So which of those would I don't know. I don't know which one of those I prefer though. I'll pass it over to Shem as I think about it.
Yeah, you have a good old thinkaroo. I would not want the songs in my head nonstop. When that happens, I'm often like, all right, where's my phone? Put on some music to get it out of my head, like drain it out. But I love lyrics and songs. Like I love poetry, that kind of stuff, and just the creativity that comes from writing. So the thought of like forgetting my favorite lyrics is actually kind of cool because then I can actually re-enjoy them for the first time. Like, wow, I never knew it said that. That's a really creative way of saying that thing.
It's a cool angle.
So it's almost be a blessing to forget some of my favorite song lyrics so that I can rediscover them.
It's like the blessing of forgetting your favorite books as you get older, like forgetting what's happened to them and being like, oh, I can read that again. And, you know, I feel when I was younger, like I never reread stuff when I was a teenager because I like remembered everything that had happened. Now that, you know, you get a little bit older, your memory gets a little bit less high functioning and you can enjoy those same books again, you know, that you knew you liked and then you discover them again. So but talking about this dilemma, I feel like sometimes the two things are related because often I get a song stuck in my head because I can't remember the lyrics, and so like it's going on loop and it can't complete the song. You know, like it's
I
like
know that
my head,
feeling.
I've got the song going, and then it gets to a point that it can't go any further ahead, so it just like starts again from the beginning. And so sometimes I have to like look up the lyrics or listen to the whole song so that I've like completed it, and it's like my mind can move on to something else. But yeah, I think. I kind of like having songs stuck in my head, to be honest. But I also am a singer and I love lyrics. And I think I find the most frustrating thing is not knowing the lyrics to a song or forgetting them. So I'd prefer not to forget the lyrics to the song. I'd prefer to have the song stuck in my head.
Have you guys ever watched a movie and it gets to this almost shameful length of time into the movie and you realize, oh, I've seen this before? Like it's not just like, oh, after the first scene, it's like quite late into the movie, you're like, wait up, wait up. And you feel like a baller because you feel like you guessed the twist. You're like, oh, I think I know what's gonna come. And it's like, wait up, actually I've seen this before. Like it's Bruce Willis in the bathroom with the pistol, like all over again.
I know that happened to me like fairly recently. I can't remember what movie it was, but yeah, it took me about half an hour to go, actually, this is seeming really, really familiar. Pretty sure I've seen this movie before. And then sure enough, like, you know, do a bit of Google search, you're like, oh, it's that one. All right, gotcha. Yep. Turn it off. No. Or I just enjoy it the second time.
I think that did actually happen to me even when I was quite young because it was like a movie I had watched like a week that I was really sick. And so I think I'd been like kind of delirious while I was watching it. It was like one of those weeks where you're just like real sick. And then like I rewatched it some years later. And yeah, after like about half of it, I'm like, no, I think I have seen this one, you know?
One of my daughters, like, she constantly sings. So I don't even need these songs stuck in my head. They're just stuck out there in the atmosphere, in my ears, really, singing the same song over and over on loop until I say, oi, can you stop singing that song over and over? She's oblivious to she's even doing it. She just like loves to sing. So that's already enough for me to wear me down. So if it was stuck in my head and you can't get it out, it'd probably ruin me. So
Yeah.
I'll take the forgetting the lyrics one.
I think forgetting the lyrics is the lesser of two evils. Like I've got both constantly, but I think the fact that I'm tapping away or I've got a song in my head, occasionally it's a song that I don't mind being in my head, but there is the annoying element too. I heard that there's a trick that you can do, and there's something about the song, the Bob the Builder song, that means that it's not actually that catchy and doesn't get stuck in your head. So if you've got a song that's stuck in your head, you just sing out Bob the Builder, can he fix it? Just do that a few times, and It's this kind of thing where, you get like the vivid on the whiteboard and then you use the whiteboard marker and it disappears. It's like Bob the Builder it sticks to the sticky song, but it doesn't stick itself. And it just disappears. And now half of our listeners have got Bob the Builder stuck in their head right now.
It's got a good pace to it, that song. Eh?
Yeah.
It's a cleansing ritual.
Yeah. Yes, he can. He can fix it. And he will.
So, welcome everyone to this episode of Lens and Veil. We're bringing another special episode, and we're going to be talking about the 3 Kennerspiel nominations. We've played them all together, and we're going to be giving a little overview of them and then talk about some things that we liked, a couple of things maybe that we didn't like as much, and then at the end we'll be doing some sort of predictions, who we think should win and who we'd like to win. So first of all, I'm going to throw the ball straight away to Shem, who's going to talk about our first game.
Oh, so the first game that we played, or not necessarily played, but one to talk about, is called Looot. Not Loot, but with 3 O's, Looot. And this is designed by, I'll try not to butcher their names, sorry guys, but Charles Chevallier and Laurent Escoffier. That's what I'm going to say, and that's probably wrong, but that's what I've said. It is published by Gigamic, I think they're called. It is a interesting game. It's a 2 to 4 player game that has high interaction, but also this kind of puzzly tile laying type thing going on. There's a shared area of these large tiles that you join together to make a landscape, and on this landscape are a variety of different resources you can pick up. Each turn you'll be placing one of your Vikings onto a space that is adjacent to the shore or to any player's Viking that's previously placed, and then you'll place your Viking and gain the resource on that spot. There's a few other things where you can sort of make a chain from one tower to another. If you do that, you pick up these tower tiles. If you get 4, 8 or 12 Vikings in a cluster adjacent to a fortress, you gain one of those fortress tiles. And if you place one next to a house, you get a house tile. So there's all these things on the map that we're kind of vying for, trying to grab and take. It's kind of like a drafting game in a sense, but there's this spatial element to that draft. So we're kind of, as we take things off or claim things, we are opening up new opportunities to other players. So there's that whole thing going on, gathering resources essentially and placing them. And each time you get those resources, there's little hexagonal kind of tiles, you place them onto your own personal player board, and you can place them wherever you want, but you are trying to place them in a way that achieves these little goal tiles. So you'll start with these 3 goals, which say, have these things around them. If you do that, you can flip it over and it's worth some points, or it might increase the value of one scoring condition. So another thing you can do on your turn is that you can take one new goal from the shoreline, little long ships you can take, and you can place those goals wherever you want as well. And you're trying to do, like with the tiles, the resources, you're trying to place them in a way that you then achieve these goals. So you might take a tile that says, if you can put 2 sheep and a tree next to this tile, you can flip it over and now all of your sheep are worth 1 more point that you have. That's the general thing. So there's just a variety of tiles that you're trying to gather. You're trying to place them in a way that scores more points. At the end of the game, basically everything you collect, every type of resource and building is going to be worth some number of points. And how many points they're worth is based on you achieving those goals. Each turn you're placing 1 Viking, and then basically the game ends once everyone's placed their Vikings. There's a few other things going on, but that's the general overview. Very small, easy to teach, quite accessible kind of game. If you enjoy some good interaction with also a good puzzle, then it's definitely a game to check out. So, Sam, we're going to go through kind of loves and likes, things we did like, didn't like. What are some things you loved about this game in particular?
One of the things I really liked about this game was the fact that, in a sense, it's a resource gathering game. We're using these workers to gather resources. We place them on our little player board. But the resources are hexagons, as you've already explained. And also, we are gathering contracts that are also these boat tiles, but they're essentially contracts that we place on the same hexagon grid. So resources go on there and contracts go on there. And so this is really like a very fancy recipe fulfillment game where you are gathering resources and to fulfill these recipes, to fulfill these contracts, but it's done in such a clean and innovative way. I love the idea of using this one sheep, placing this sheep next to 3 different contracts that require a sheep, and that sheep is used 3 different times. And so that feels very, very efficient and min-maxy. How you place out these hexagons on your player board to get the most use, most value out of each of your resources, but also getting the most value out of each of your contracts, I think is a really cool idea and a great puzzly decision.
You know, I like the way that this whole puzzle you're kind of building to try and get those contracts done. It's the whole thing like spinning plates. Like you try to have multiple going at one time, and that's the challenge of the game. Like if you have one going at a time, just one contract, it can take you 2 or 3 turns to complete it, and then you start a new contract. That's just not going to work because you need more. So you're constantly like having like 3 to 5 going at once, right? And your brain starts to get a bit overload. Like, what's my priority? What really matters? Because what are they scoring? So the whole thing of like trying to manage these different goals all at once, and like you said, trying to achieve them with one piece, like one sheep that fulfills 3 is like the kind of way to go. That's a real fun part for me. There's plenty of other games out there. I know Rosenberg did a few in the last few years. The names are probably going to slip my mind. Sagani, I think, is one of them. The one Sam, you and I played, Nova.
Oh yeah, Luna Nova Luna.
We'll say it's something like that.
Yeah,
where they have that same system where it's like you're trying to kind of manage multiple goals at once, and the more you take on, the more goals you take on, the more this kind of brain burn puzzle starts to unload. But I like how in this game it's kind of more within your own control. Like you choose how much you can handle at once. Whereas some of those other games by your way, they're like each time you place a tile, there's more things you could do. Like the goals actually start to escalate, which gets out of control. So loot is kind of more manageable, right? In that way.
Yeah. I think it's quite delightful when designers just basically give you so much permission that you can take as many of these things once per turn, but you get so many turns that you can take more than you possibly would ever want, right, over the course of a game. And they just give you permission. Take another one, take another one, take another one. And they almost give you enough rope to hang yourself. Like it's just like you just play on your greed. Like you just keep going for it if you want. And I love that, where the player has to decide, actually, I need to stop now. Maybe it's out of sheer overwhelm, or maybe it's out of strategy.
It's worth noting one thing though, is that any goal you do not achieve, you actually lose 5 points, kind of Ticket to Ride style. So
Yes.
there is still that kind of risk of like, don't do too many because you might not finish them.
And I think the thing that's really interesting is that the goals are often unsynergistic. So you're going to be buffing a certain resource, but you're not using that resource to fulfill the goal, or maybe you're using one of that resource. So although you're buffing the scoring for that resource, like you don't need to get that resource to do that. So you need to be getting that resource somewhere else. Otherwise, like, what are you scoring? So what was the point in fulfilling the contract? So there's kind of different ways you can play it. You can try and go wide and buff your scoring for a lot of different resources instead of focusing on one. And that way, like, you're scoring everything better, you know, and you're getting lots of different resources. Or you can try and just focus down on one resource and be like, I'm going to get a bunch of these tiles that are going to buff my sheep. So I'm going to score heaps and heaps for sheep. But then you need to try and get lots of sheep onto your board as well. And maybe each of those contracts only needs from 0 to 1 sheep to fulfill them. So you might actually only end up with 3 sheep. So I think that's a really interesting twist, which kind of makes it hard to solve that puzzle as well. Every game, you don't feel like you've solved it and you can just do a strategy and that's going to work.
Yeah, I had that down as the second thing that I love as well, that anti-synergy of these boat tiles. Like, as you said, if you've got a bunch of axes, there's 2 choices for you right now. You can feel really, really efficient by drafting these boat tiles that are nearly done. You just place them. This boat tile might require 2 axes and a sheep. You draft it, you place it next to 2 of your axes. It's nearly done. It's great. But what's the problem? It's buffing the scoring for your trees, and you don't have trees. You've got axes, right? So you feel really efficient and smart, but it's not going to do that much for you. Or you could draft these tiles that are going to buff the scoring for your axes, but what's the problem? You don't need axes to fulfill them. You need other types of resources. So it's really, really clever getting that balance right. It's very hard to lean fully into something, but it's like the game design tempts you that you could lean into this thing. Maybe it's hypothetically possible to do so.
I think in that first game I did terribly well. From memory, I think I had like my gold as 9 points each. Like for whatever reason, I'd taken all these long ships that scored gold, and I had a grand total of 1 gold on my playboard by the end. So that first game I kind of launched into it, didn't really give much thought. Oh, this is a fun tile lane game. I'm just going to play it. I'm not going to burn my brain over trying to figure out the most points, because in that first play also, the points felt very like abstract. Like I didn't understand the game. So how do I get points? How do I prioritize points? I don't really care. I was just like, I'm just going to take stuff, try and do contracts, blah, blah, blah. But once you know the game better, once you realize, you really need to focus on like what you're scoring, as that's a big part of it. And while navigating the whole interaction part of the map, then you can actually start to focus. But it's still a challenge regardless. Like you said, they don't always synergize. So I think you can kind of ignore one or two resources if you really want to. That's one thing I noticed in the last play. I think I had like 2 trees, not maybe 1 tree, and didn't have any bonus stuff for scoring trees. So you can try and ignore stuff, but you're always at the mercy of the draft, what shows up, that kind of thing as well. Anything else to add that you love, Zach?
Love, I don't think it's the right word, but I really appreciate the fact that it's a really simple system of like place a Viking on a tile and no one else can place on that tile. But then you have these 3 one-off abilities that are the same for everyone. One time you can place where someone else is. One time you can get double resources on your placement, and one time you can place 2 Vikings in a row. So like place onto 2 different hexes. And that's just like such a nice little twist that doesn't really add too much like rules overhead or making the game any more complicated, but it just adds enough extra spice to make it feel like you're never exactly safe because other people can do stuff to mess with you. And at the same time, if you hold on to those, you always feel like you can get what you need if you need to, so you don't feel like you're completely blocked out of stuff as long as you've got those powers. So yeah, I think that was just a really clever addition to the game.
Yeah, I quite enjoy those tiles. And there's this nice temptation that comes with them where you kind of want to use them quickly because they're so good. I think I used all 3 of mine within like the first third of our last game because it was just far too tempting. Like if I use that thing to go where you are, like place my Viking where someone else is, I can get this fortress. Like I could do it. But I could take my time and work my way around it and get it anyway, but I want it now. And like that kind of pressure you really feel in the game.
You were the Baron of all the fortresses. You just had this mad clan of like all these tribes next to the whatever they're called, the workers next to all these fortresses. I think you had like 3 or 4 fortresses, maybe more.
Yeah.
It was crazy. Actually, no, there was a turn where you picked up 4. You must have had more than that.
Yeah, like 5.
So one of the things that this is more of a taste thing rather than like a bad design thing. One of the things that I don't quite like in the game too much, and like I said, it's taste. I'm not saying it's bad. Is just the amalgamation of this like high interactive puzzle, the draft essentially, or the map stuff versus the brain booty, matchy set collection kind of puzzle that you're doing on your own. They both things I like. Like I like those games where there is this like heads down interactive kind of like puzzle that we're mathing over versus me on my own little playboard doing my own little thing. I like both those things, but for whatever reason in this particular game, like those 2 things seem to be at odds with me. Like I don't want, if I'm going to do this brain burning puzzle of placing tiles to try and combo things and get the best possible scoring, I don't want you to mess with my plans. Like I don't want you touching the things I want on the map. Like get away from my gold spots, like they're mine. So there's this weird thing of like, well, you can get quite shafted. Obviously that's the magic of the game in a way, but for me it kind of doesn't quite satisfy me in that way because they're kind of at odds. I don't know. Maybe I know Sam, you were saying yesterday, I think it was, it's not a thing for you. Like you don't care. Like it works well for you. So it's definitely a taste thing.
To me, that's to the game's credit. So again, that's just proving that it is a taste thing because I feel like I'm almost about at saturation point with these heads down tile placement games that take about an hour with a cute nature theme. There's a lot of them and they are great designs. I've seen a lot of them and all of these kind of layered emergent scoring. They are very interesting and very puzzly, but I like that element of a little bit more interaction to sink my teeth into, I guess. So I really enjoyed that element to this game. And I especially enjoyed it where we started on the corner of the map. So we played a game where we started in the center of the map. We have to place a Viking adjacent to a Viking that has already been placed. And the game where we started in the center of the map, it kind of felt like we could get everywhere and there wasn't as much of a scarcity of resources. So we were mostly hampered down by our own decisions that we made with the longboat tiles and the natural interaction for the building tiles that are scarce. But otherwise, the resources themselves, the wood, the sheep, the axe, and the gold, felt like when we started in the middle, we could get to any of them whenever we wanted. Whereas when we started in the corner, I don't know, I just found that a little bit harder to get the exact resource that you want because we hadn't got to this big gold vein, this big patch of sheep or whatever. So I thought that was more interesting.
So I think for me, I'm not exactly sure how to put it into words in an eloquent way, but there's this thing in this game which happens in a lot of games, and it's something that like I don't like that much, and I like it when people manage to kind of take the edges off or find a way around it. But it's that thing of like, if it was a 2-player game, I'm not going to place on this spot because if I go there, then he's going to go there. And so there's just this like, no one places on that spot because then the other person will get access to the thing. Do you get what I'm saying? Because you can place next to where anyone else is placed, you're suddenly like, actually, I don't want to go there because I want the thing after that. So I'm just not going to go in that direction. And then when you're playing in 3-player, it's even worse because maybe you don't place there, but then you place in a spot and then another person places the next spot and then the third person gets the thing that you needed and you just didn't have a chance because it was just like, it went around the table. So I'm not sure like what you would call this, but it's that kind of like not being able to do stuff because if you do stuff, you just know that then other people are going to get what you need because of the move that you did.
It's kind of like unstable equilibrium where one action leads to another and it's a kind of cascades where it becomes quite predictable, perhaps, what other people will do.
Yeah, but in a way that kind of means that you can't actually go for what you want or like work towards that because working towards that is actually getting it for the other people, not for yourself.
My thing that I don't love about the game is it's really hard. I think I'm the hottest on this game out of all of us. I think I liked it perhaps the most. I think it's a really, really solid game. And in fact, I'm going to use a word which will probably gain some really interesting reactions. I think this game is almost flawless. And I'm usually someone who loves to nitpick at games. I'll say, oh, what if they did this? What if they did this? If this game was given to me to tweak, I don't know if I would do anything or what I would do. However, this sounds a little harsh, but perhaps it's missing some X factor. I think this is a really interesting topic of conversation where there are some games that are flawless and maybe don't have any issues and things that you would change. And yet they might not excite you. They might not delight you. They might not reach the high heights of some other games that have more flaws. Like if you told me, do you want to play Looot or SETI? They're doing completely different things. So there's context there. But even though I had a lot of nitpicks in the podcast episode about SETI, I would much rather play SETI than Looot. And so there's this whole thing around X factor and a game's ceiling. And I think that this game delivers what it's trying to do, and I think it does it really, really well, and I like it a lot, but it doesn't go into the top tier of games for me, and that's not for any fault. It just seems to be lacking that excitement or X factor, perhaps. I don't know what you guys think about that, about flawless versus maybe flawed but very exciting.
I'm still just reeling from you calling the game flawless. No, that's joking. I totally agree. Where there's some games are flawed. Like there's games I really love that I know have issues, but there's just something about them, like some charm that they have that I have fun playing them. Like it's one of those weird things. It's hard to really like put into words or numbers or whatever. Like you can't really say why. It's just, and it's like you said, there's games like Loot or other games in that kind of vein where it's great. Like it's nothing wrong with it. It's great. I mean, it got nominated, so that's something, right? But you aren't like amped to go play it back to back to back in an afternoon. You can like one play, you're like, yeah, that was cool. All right, next game. But you don't really like think about it while you're lying in bed going, oh, next time I play, I'll do this. It doesn't have the kind of scope to it or that breadth to it. So yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, I think in other podcasts I've talked about, is a game fun? We often talk about like, is it well designed and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, there's that special magic that games have, which you can't always break down into mechanisms, or you can't always quantify or put it into a scheme, and I think that's what you're talking about. It's the X factor. It's like, is it like how fun is this? And Loot was a good game, but it didn't excite me and make me want to play it again. Like for me, a game is really fun when I'm just like, I just want to play this another time. Let's just start again. And Loot, after I'd finished playing it, was like, cool, that was a nice game, but it didn't like make me want to get the game out, like just to reset everything and start again. And so yeah, I kind of agree with that.
We're blessed to live in a time such as now when there are so many good or even great games that are coming out, but I feel like there is a downside when we are familiar with so many different games and we've played so many different games. It takes a little bit more to surprise us. It takes a little bit more to really wow us. Unfortunately, I think maybe jaded is the word. We still really love games, obviously, but Do you know what I mean? Like we get a little bit more picky with our taste. It's like we're now having the fine dining. Oh, yes, I need some saffron with that. Give me the caviar rather than just like the cheeseburgers, right? And I would love to go back to the cheeseburger games and enjoy them as much as I once did, but it's really hard to, like, if I'm honest. And so I want to be able to do that. I want to change in that way, but it is hard to, I don't know, to reignite that like surprise about a game and the initial really delight because we've seen so many different mechanisms used many different times before.
Yeah, two games that come to mind for me are Carcassonne and Ticket to Ride, where I'm still very happy to play those games because I played them first, right? They were my first introduction into these kind of gateway style games, which led me into more Euro style games. So I still love those games and I still play those games. But if I had played it for the first time now, I don't know if I would have been like, oh man, let's play that again. So there's this kind of nostalgic thing, or like the first time you see something fresh, it sticks more, I guess. Whereas Loot, like it's innovative in a way, the way it brings it together, but it's not really bringing anything like, oh, that's so cool. Haven't seen that before. Like it's not mind blowing in that kind of aspect, but it does come together well. But there's nothing for me to go, oh man, that's cool. I want to see that again. Play it again. You know?
Yeah.
Whereas the first time I played Ticket to Ride or Carcassonne, that was definitely the feeling. Like, whoa, this is amazing. Yeah. Like this is going back like 15 years or something. And that's why I still enjoy them, because I guess it's that nostalgic buzz of the first time I played it still sticks.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And at the same time, I think it's quite unfair to expect that of a game. Do you know what I mean? Like, yep. I agree that it doesn't do that, but should each game, and is it possible that each game could do that? I'm not sure.
I don't think so. I mean, like, you guys are coffee drinkers. How often does a coffee blow you away now? You know what flavors you like, and how often you go, I've never tasted that before. That's amazing. You just know the flavor you want, and when you have it, you're like, cool, that's the flavor I wanted, and that's that. So yeah. It's the thing. The more you develop your taste or your palate for games, the less something can surprise you, I suppose. Or
do you think that skydiving instructors ever just get bored? Like they're just like, oh, just another day at the office. Like, I'm just gonna jump out of this plane for the 400th time. Like, they're just like on their way down. Like, oh, I've seen this view before. Like, it's just a bit mundane, isn't it?
Definitely.
Maybe
you're probably thinking about dinner. You know.
Yeah.
What am I going to cook this evening? Yeah. No, and the irony of it all is that if you become like connoisseurs, or if you become too expert in a thing, you can actually start to lose touch with like what normal people actually like, and you know that's a danger for us because we're not only critics. You know, if we were just people who did a podcast, it might be okay. We can become super snooty about games, but we also make games for people to play, and we want to make games that lots of people enjoy. So we need to try and enjoy like the same things as a big enough group of people that we can make things that they will enjoy. So yeah, it's tricky.
Anyway, Loot, definitely worth checking out. It's a really cool game. Really, really cool game. So the next game that we are going to be talking about is Endeavour Deep Sea. Now, a little bit of a caveat with this. We know the designers, Carl de Visser and Jarratt Gray, and Jarratt Gray in particular. He's a good friend of mine. We hang out from time to time. We play games together. He's been a play tester for a bunch of our games. So there is going to be a little bit of bias, or there's potential for a little bit of bias when talking about this game. So we're going to do our best when talking about this. So this is kind of like a re-implementation of Endeavour Age of Sail, which is also a re-implementation of the old school game from Z-Man Endeavour from, I think it was like 2009, 2010, that sort of era. But it's unfair just to call it a re-implementation. There are a lot of new things in this game as well, not just a new theme where we are exploring the deep sea, we're doing conservation and gaining reputation, inspiration, coordination, and ingenuity. These are these tracks that we are boosting throughout the game. That's kind of the theme of the game, is that we are kind of all about conservation of the seas and discovery in doing so also. So the game is going to be played over 6 rounds. In each round, we have this really kind of interesting flow. We start the round by each player recruiting a specialist, and the level of the specialist that they can recruit is based on their reputation track. So you can get the more powerful specialists who can do better actions, if you are further along the reputation track. Then after that, we're going to gain discs. Discs are the primary economy of this game that are going to be used to fuel your actions. More on those later. Then we're going to retrieve discs from our specialists. That's based on our coordination track. And then we will take actions. Each player is going to take an action. We're going to keep going around in clockwise order like normal games. But it has this really interesting arc. So at the start of the game, you have only 2 specialists and you have 2 or 3 discs. Your starting specialist can do any of the 4 or 5 different actions that are in the game. And then you will have also recruited 1 other specialist in the first recruitment phase. To use a specialist, you take a disc that you've got and you place it on the specialist. It's essentially like your own personal worker placement, and then you do the action. The actions that you can do are moving your vessels around underwater. Your ingenuity track will dictate how deep you can go underwater. You can scan for more tiles, which are basically going to reveal this map. You can go out wide, or you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And the deeper you can get underwater, the more bonuses and stronger the actions become. You can journal, which is about claiming cards for point scoring, set collection, and other bonuses. You can do some conservation actions, which are also scoring points. And some of these actions like journaling and sonar and conservation, not only are you placing a disc on the specialist you use to take that action, but you also place a disc on the map to show that you have done that action, which blocks it for other players doing it. There might also be some positive interaction around 2 discs next to each other. Both players who did those things will get a bonus. But also those discs on the map will score you points at the end of the game. So one of the big tensions in this game is managing how many discs you have. That is quite an interesting tension. And as the game goes on, you're going to be able to generate more and more each round. Oh, you could also dive. Diving will pick up a token, which is going to give you some DNA. And DNA is the resource that you'll spend in order to journal or do conservation actions. So, Zach, what did you like or love about this game?
I've never played any of the other endeavors, so this is the first one I played. And so I just really appreciated that core system of like the discs and those tracks. Like I really loved that. The first time I played it, I was like, man, this is really cool. I love how like simple and clean it is. And this kind of whole idea of like, I want to get my discs back off my people. Like that's one of the tracks is to get your discs off the people, because then you're clearing them up to be able to do those actions again the next turn. So you need to boost that track, and you also get the discs back. But you're also, as you said, be doing some actions where you're placing discs onto the map. So you need to up the action that you're actually earning more discs as well. And also you're going to be getting a new crew member every round as well. So you need to be getting extra discs that you can place on them. So you're kind of under this pressure, and then all the good actions are actually going to be deeper down. So you need to up your movement and depth ability, and you also get more submarines by upping that. And so you feel under pressure that you need to move up that track as well. And all the crew members, the specialists that you can hire, obviously the higher up you get on that track, you can get people that do way more powerful actions that let you, with one disc placed on them, to do 2 different actions.
Yeah.
And so you feel under pressure to go up all the tracks. And that's great. I love that. This doesn't feel like there's a super obvious track. I think maybe I would tend to want to go up the other tracks a little bit before the movement track, just to get the engine rolling a little bit. But there's at least like 3 tracks that I feel like really pressured to go up, and you can't do all of them as far as you would like to. So that's a great tension, and kind of figuring out how you're going to make the most of that, especially at the beginning of the game when you're trying to get rolling. Yeah, that's one thing I really loved.
Yeah, those tracks are in the original Endeavour as well. That's probably is my favorite part of the original as well, where it is about like which part of the engine do you focus on first, and how it feels different to play a certain way. Like, do you rush up that tech track to give you better, stronger tiles in later rounds, or do you up your income track, get more discs? So yeah, that's already in the first game, and I loved it in the first game. And it works just as well here, I think. Like, doesn't change too much. What was getting cards, or increasing your card limit at least, changed to the whole movement thing with the subs. But the rest of the other 3 tracks are very much the same. One new thing that I actually quite like in Deep Sea, which is not in the original Endeavour, is how there's these 4 different actions for your discs. So there are different actions in Endeavour. They're mostly about movement and sort of conquest, and I think there's attack as well, like with your cannons. and getting cards. So there were these actions you could do, but they didn't feel quite as, I don't know, standout as in Deep Sea. In Deep Sea, you've got the dive, sonar, conserve, and journal. There's also movement, but these main four all have you like using actions with your discs. The dive is kind of different where you don't actually have to sacrifice another disc onto the map, as Sam was saying in the intro, where the other three, you kind of take the action, place it on your token, then put another disc out on the map. I like how those four actions, the four kind of main focus actions, I guess you could say, how they all work differently, but they're still following a very simple like rule structure. Like they're basically like, do this thing, put a disc somewhere else, or get a token in dive situation. I like how they're simple, but yet they all have this own kind of feel with a wrinkle to them. Like the journal is how you get the cards, and the conservation is using some of that stuff you would have spent on cards otherwise, the DNA, but you get lots of chains and little powers triggering off. So that's one of my kind of favorite new parts of the game, I think, is just how those four core actions work and how you have to kind of decide where your discs are going to use those actions.
Just to speak about the dive action, which is one that doesn't use a disc, as you were just saying before, they totally pull a trick on us players, because there must have been an early version, maybe there wasn't, where they basically need an action where players get 3 or 4 DNA on their turn, right? And so if that were the action, just to gather 3 or 4 DNA, it would just be kind of like, oh, this is just a resource gathering action that I'm not that excited about. But they disguise that by saying, hey, you pick up this tile, which is going to give you the option of 3 or 4 DNA, but it might give you another option as well of doing something else. And now this action seems way more exciting than what it basically is, which is basically just get 3 or 4 DNA. Like, I didn't really notice that until now, but I'm thinking about it. Yeah, that's a fancy way of just saying, hey, take 3 DNA.
To their credit, they also tie in quite a few of those tiles. Like when you take a dive action, either something else happens as well,
Yeah,
or when the whole pool of dive tokens empties, something happens. So there's a nice extra layer there as well to consider. I had one in our last game where I was the only player present on that tile, and it said like once they're all gone, everyone on this tile can move to the space. So I basically dive, and then got to jump off and trigger the arrival bonus of my sub moving somewhere else and do another action there. So yeah, it's good.
And I have to say, I appreciated in the last game we had recently the getting like a free action of one of those tokens where you don't have to place a disc. Like sometimes that's essential for your round because you're like, actually, I've already used that action on the people that I have, and I don't actually have enough discs to be able to do that action and place a disc onto the map. So like that can be super great as well. So I think you're right there, and that was kind of the purpose of it, but they managed to like turn it into something that is really great for the game.
one of the things that I love about the game is it's kind of a broad category, but I'll just use the word arc, the arc of the game, or the power up, I suppose. The game is actually quite easy to teach. You look at it and it looks like this kind of big heavy euro, and it gives you good feelings like a heavy euro does. Like there's a lot of sequencing considerations, there's leveling up, there's all sorts of things like that. But it's quite easy to teach. All the actions are very easy to explain. And so the first round is super fast. You've only got 2 or 3 discs. You can only take 2 or 3 actions. You get a really quick feel for, okay, this is what a round is like. And by the time you get to the 6th round, you've got these 6 or 7 specialists in front of you, all these discs in front of you, and you just feel so much more powerful based on the tracks that you have. Also, there's this kind of collective element as well. As we get more powerful, as we scan more of the ocean floor, we get access to these better and better tiles that are deeper and deeper underwater. And so we kind of collectively are leveling up the ocean, and we're making all of our actions more powerful as we go deeper and deeper. So the arc, I think, is really fascinating in this game. Like, it's almost like round 1, not much happens at all. And this is their way of kind of teaching you the game, which could be a downside to some, but I think that the arc is a really fascinating element to the game.
Yeah, you're right. I do find the first 2 rounds really like kind of uneventful and not that exciting because it's just I take 1 or 2 actions, we're done. And I think even Paladins can have that same thing for some players where you feel very weak at the start and stronger towards the end. So it's like it's kind of necessary that it is that way so that you do feel the power of the engine building later on. You need that kind of, I don't know, that contrast, I guess, in the game, but it can feel like, especially, let's say round 2, I do 1 action, Sam does 3. That's so noticeable, right? I see he did 2 more actions. So and it can feel like, oh, he's getting a better start. It might not pan out that way, but because there's so few actions early on, you notice it. Whereas later on, you're taking, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 to 10 actions. You don't notice that someone else has only done 2 less or 2 more or whatever it might be. But you're right. I think it's the positive side of this whole thing is that it is easy to get into because you basically do 1 or 2 turns and go, cool, that's a round. That's the game. Let's go, next round. And it's easy to teach someone with that kind of structure. So, I mean, this is probably why it's been nominated because it is accessible and it is like easy to teach, easy for a new player to jump in and go, oh yeah, I can do that. But when you know the game and you're trying to be competitive, that those first 2 rounds can feel like too tight. Like I want to do more. Let me do more. So it's interesting. It's definitely tailored towards, I think, someone having a good first experience, which is a good thing. Like it's good for like most board games try and do this. We probably don't do it as much as other publishers, but we want to have games that we play over and over again. So it's a different kind of approach, I suppose.
Another thing I really like about it is that this is a game where I really like the exploration. Revealing the new tiles is actually super fun, and like a lot of them have their own special rules. And the thing is, when you do sonar, it's so you get in the bonus when you reveal a tile, which only the player who does the sonar gets. But you're not on top of that tile yet. Anyone can go there, and other people could get there before you because you just revealed the tile. So I think it's got this nice balance compared to sometimes with other games with exploration, where it's like you explored a tile and now you're there and you can do all the cool stuff that it's got. Where it's like you explored a tile, you revealed it, and now anyone could go there and do the cool stuff it's got. And you don't have any advantage on the other players, apart from the fact you get to choose where to put it. So if people have submarines all on the other side of the map, you could put it over on your side. But, often later on in the game, people have multiple submarines around the place. So, yeah, I think I'm not always a fan of exploration in games, but I actually really like it in this game.
I 100% agree. I think the ocean boards are genius, and I think they are the thing that, to me, stands out the most with this version of the game compared to every previous game which had Endeavour in the title. I think that it actually weirdly gives me some Great Western Trail vibes, where in Great Western Trail you start off with there's like 7 actions on the map that you can use, and over the course of the game players are building more actions that they can use themselves. And in this, it's like we're collectively building out these more actions on the board that we can use, and it's a really cool way of showcasing the art. I love that the gradient of blue gets deeper and darker as we go deeper and deeper. And the actions get stronger too. And we've got orca whales and we've got all sorts of different like weird coral and funky things going on there. And it creates this, I think, really good variety from game to game. Like there might be certain tiles that really benefit you doing conservation actions there, or benefit you doing sonar actions there. And they've even added some modules, some sort of little expansion modules as well, which change up the game. And you're not going to see every tile every game. So I think it's a masterstroke of design for adding in variety into the game and creating a little bit of a sense of urgency about getting to key spots first. It's also a nice feeling as a player to see a tile filled up with discs, and then you can say, right, we need to move on now. It's very clear. It gives you very clear direction that we've done everything we can do here. We need to move on to find some greener pastures. One other small thing that I really enjoy about this is the positive player interaction in this game. I really like positive player interaction, and that shows up on some of the ocean boards where there's bonuses for being next to each other and all sorts of things like that. There was a play where Shem and I were just sitting on this tile together, and we were both benefiting big time. And Zach wasn't there, so I was like, sweet, we're just going to have a good swing versus Zach, where we're both doing the same and then getting a bonus for linking our discs together. So we're sort of scratching each other's back. That was good. And yeah, I enjoy that. It also shows up in the journals as well, that one person does a really cheap journal that didn't require much DNA. They get a bonus. Everyone else gets a bonus as well. It's possible that this creates a fair bit of power creep that might not scale super well. Like at 2-player, this happens less often. And at 4-player, this happens more often. I'm not sure how they've accounted for that level of power creep, but I do like the feeling of the positive interaction in the game.
Getting to things that I didn't like the positive player interaction in the game because Shem and Sam ganged up on me. No, I'm not for that reason. So Seriously though, one thing that bothered me about the game, because it actually was different from the first time I played it to the second time I played it. So the first time I played this game, I played it 2 times in a row. So look, I'd said before I like games that I want to play 2 times in a row, and I played it 2 player, and I really liked it. And then recently we played it 3 player, all three of us, and the positive player interaction on the cards. So basically, it's like, get this card, I get to bump a track twice, everyone else gets to bump it once, or something like that. And it was a scenario where like getting cards was like the best way to score points, or one of the best ways to score points. So, everyone was trying to get some cards. But it just meant that we were all at the top of our tracks without, like, by the end of the game, we were all just circling around at the top. And it wasn't like that struggle. Like in the 2 player game, it was like a struggle to get to the top level of the track. Like it was hard. I had to find ways to maximize the track. And whereas in that 3 player game, it was just like everyone got to the top and also like circled around on some people maybe multiple times. And I feel like that would have been even worse in a 4 player game. So that kind of bothered me because, and I've mentioned this before, when I play a game and I just feel like I've completed everything, I don't feel as much desire to play it again. I kind of feel like, oh, well, I've done everything there is to do in that game. I may as well move on. And I actually want the game to be like, oh man, I managed to max out 2 tracks this game, but I just couldn't quite get those other 2 up. So yeah, so I don't know, like that bothered me a bit coming from having only played 2 player to playing 3 player.
It's an interesting design conversation where positive player interaction is a really good thing for a game and for players. Some people really like it, like me, but it can create this issue of, at 4 players, we just get more done and we have higher scores. And Shem and I encountered this in designing Inventors of the South Tigris, where we were just like, scores at 4 player are just higher. We just felt like we were getting more done. And so even though there were some other ways to counter it, where the influence scoring, there's some area majority scoring, it feels like at 2 player, every player should average a higher score in those areas than they would at 4 player, because there's, fewer players to distribute those points amongst. It still felt like more was getting done just because of the amount of positive player interaction in the game. And so it's a really interesting design challenge to kind of solve. There's one other game that I've been working on for a while now that has cards that do this kind of positive interaction, where someone does a thing, they get a really good bonus, and then everyone else gets a bonus as well. And at 4 player, obviously, this just means that more players are getting more stuff, and so on average, scores will be higher. And one way that I sort of countered that is that there are these little races to get particular things that only one person can get. And so at 2 player, where you're getting less of the positive interaction bonuses, because there's fewer players doing it, and you see fewer cards, you're going to get more of those being the first to do the thing bonuses. And whereas at 4 player, you're going to get less of them because there's more competition for those. So those 2 things sort of balanced out in a weird way, even though they're not the same. They sort of balanced out so that scores are roughly similar at high and low player counts.
I can think of one other game that does do positive player action, but kind of limits it so it scales better, would be Scythe, where there's these actions. There's a few games that do this as well, where the actions are like, if your direct neighbors do something, then you get something. So even at like 5 or 6 player, it's not going to bloat the game. So that can be one clean way of doing it. But it does have a flaw, as well as like the flaw of the thing you talked about with the conservation, where you and I were doing one board together, where I call it a flaw. Maybe it's not a flaw, but where it's like the player who doesn't interact is going to lose. That's my biggest gripe with Hansa Teutonica, is that like if you don't interact, good luck winning the game, because you need those little interactions to give you more stuff. So the downside to the whole thing of like, your neighbors get a benefit, is that if you're sitting opposite that person that's being super generous, then you miss out. So it's like it does help settle down that bloat that you're talking about, but it does actually might give an advantage to or disadvantage to a certain player. So it's a hard thing to solve, I think, and maybe it's unsolvable, but there's some ways you can try and like mitigate it, like you said, bring in other elements to the game like the races or whatever it might be, to try and make it so not less impactful, I guess, on the final scores.
Yeah, and I don't know if, like, my problem with it is that it was often boosting tracks for people. Like maybe they could have just given DNA more often or something like that. It's something that could be impactful but isn't immediately impactful because so many of the cards that we got, and maybe it was just like luck because of the cards that we drew in that game, and maybe there's way more that give DNA in the deck. But so many of the cards seem to be everyone else boosts their track, and so by the time Sam's journaled three of those cards. I've journaled three of those cards, and Shem's journaled three of those cards. Like we've all had 6 free track bumps, and that's crazy. So yeah, I think that's a way to balance it as well as have those kind of like resources which are good but not great. Those resources that kind of help put some oil between the ball bearings of your engine, but don't actually like improve your engine. If you know what I'm saying, I think that can be a solution to this.
Yeah, nice.
On the topic of kind of points and that kind of stuff, one other thing that I don't love in the game, I think we all felt a similar way, are these scenario boards that give a focused scoring condition where the majority of them are where you get points for doing this thing and the player who does it the most gets an extra bunch of points. I don't love this in most games. Like the whole most scoring thing bothers me in a lot of games because either you overinvest and come second, so you've just put so much effort where you could have done it somewhere else and you don't win, or you just ignore it and like maybe that works out for you, but maybe it doesn't. So I don't know, I don't love this in a lot of games. We've even done this in the games where we have most and second most, and I try and make it so it's not so impactful when we do it, but it's quite strong in here. We noticed it with this last game we had. As Zach kind of mentioned, we maxed out all our tracks. So when we added up the points from like other areas, like mostly our playboard area, we were pretty even. Like we were within a few points of each other. And then this extra scoring of like who did the most of this thing, who did the most of this thing. Sam just blew us out of the water because he'd been so focused on those things that you're meant to be focused on. And I think all of us are in the camp of like, don't let the game tell us what we have to do. Like, let us explore, let us choose our focus and our direction. I don't mind direction, like from a scenario type thing, or like here's some goals to achieve, but they just seemed like overly impactful on the final scores. Like they were, I want to just guess they're about half our score, half your score, Sam. I think it maybe came from that. I can't remember the final scores exactly, but it's just so much of the score came from who can do the thing we tell you to do best. And if you're close second, well, you just wasted most of your actions doing stuff that doesn't really pay off.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of emergent scoring in games where players kind of get to pick the things that they're going to score for at the end of the game, or at least they can level those things up. But obviously that means that there's kind of more things to learn from the start, and it gives players less direction at the start because they might not have any of those things yet. So I think they've done a really, really good job of creating a lot of variety in having those 10 scenarios. Like that's a lot of gameplay, a lot of different styles of play if you're committed to playing the game lots and lots of times. But it does have the downside of saying, right, this play is what you're supposed to do. And I'm sure there is room for creativity within that, like which ocean boards you're hitting and all those sorts of things. But if you ignore everything on that board, you're not supposed to do that at all. And I'm the kind of person that doesn't like being told I'm not allowed to ignore this thing. So that's just me. I like to pick my own path. I'm not that experienced. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe there are other ways to win without touching on those. But it seemed like the points were quite significant to your point, Shem, that it would be very hard to win without going hard, or at least dabbling in those in-game points from the scenario boards.
One thing they do well though is they do give you like 3 things. So like in the last play we had, it was like scanning at the top levels, it was journaling at the bottom levels, and then having cards basically. So it's not just like do this one thing heaps, which would annoy me a lot if that was the case. Like who was the best diver? Like that's it. Like, it doesn't matter. So they give you 3 things to do. I think all the boards give you 3 things to do from memory. But when one player does say 2 of those 3 at least better than the other players, they're going to win the game. At least in the way we had where all the other points didn't actually matter because we were basically zeroed out. It really mattered about who got these races in the end, who got the best of the things. I much prefer in this situation where there's like, there's a one the most, but it's not that impactful. It's the most. Count at the end. There's one that's like all players get this thing. So there's just a focus that you can all achieve. There's no extra benefit. And there's like the first player to do this thing gets a thing. So there becomes like different kind of timings for these races. One is like, make sure you're doing this thing. You'll get rewarded for it. One's like try and have the most, but don't overinvest. Just try and have the most. And the other one is like rush this thing, rush for it. And then you as a player have that decision about which one will you focus on, because one player can't do all of them. Like that's the kind of tension I'd want. Whereas, I mean, if the players are unevenly balanced, one player could probably wash them all anyway. And his name is Sam McDonald, and he does. But like in that play we had, where it's like basically Sam did win all three of them, and me and Zach were like, cool, good game, Sam, well played. So that's
Me and Shem were on like the same amount of points basically, and Sam was just a step above.
It's possible those things show up in some of the scenarios, like the most one I think shows up, or the first to get this thing shows up. But I don't know if they all show up at the same time, is kind of what you're getting at, right?
Yeah.
And I think that last play was exacerbated by the problem that I had with the loot, the negative thing I said about loot. Because the whole star system is the same system as loot placing the Vikings. And what happened is the thing that Sam destroyed us on was getting the most of the types of symbols on cards. And I was actually, in terms of the cards, the symbols, I was really even with him in terms of on our cards. But in the star area, there was this area off to the side where you could just gain those symbols for the end game, for that scoring condition. And basically it was the same thing. There's this little gap, and it was like, don't go near there, because then the person after you will then be able to take those symbols. What happened is Sam got a turn where he got a whole like 4 stars in a turn, and he just cleaned up that whole area. And that was the difference. So it was I found that in that specific scenario to be quite frustrating, the fact that the cards at that point didn't matter as much as the stars on those symbols. But at the same time, I can understand why they put it there, because it was being like, you can still compete on this goal even if you don't do the most cards. So like the problem is that the person who did the most cards also got all of those start symbols. So then it turned into a problem.
But your frustration is my joy, my friend.
Exactly.
My delight. I'm really impressed that they managed to make all of these 10 scenarios and co-op modes as well. The amount of playtesting and balance, it just blows my mind to think that they actually did this. So massive props to the team for making such an amazing game, and with just a really big scope that isn't daunting to jump into.
So the next game that we are talking about, and the final nominee, is a game called Faraway. So Faraway is a game by Johannes Goupy and Corentin Lebrat, and as Shem said, with his reading of names, I apologize if I read them incorrectly. Faraway is a game about exploring this kind of fantasy world, and you'll be placing out these regions. So simply what you do in Faraway is you're going to play out 8 cards in front of you from left to right, and then you are going to score those cards from right to left. And when you score the cards, they'll kind of have requisites of certain regions, but you're only going to be counting things to the right of the card you're scoring. So basically, you don't count any of the stuff before it. You only count the stuff to the right. So generally when you score it, you turn over all the cards, and then you turn up the most right card, and you say, do I have the requisites? Then I get that many points. And then you turn over the next card, and you say, do I have the requisites? I get that many points. So that's kind of like the basics of the game, but it has lots of other little things going on in it. So you'll place out cards one at a time. You have kind of 3 cards in your hand, and you choose one of them in secret, and everyone else chooses one, and then you flip it over. Now, why in secret? Because each of these cards has a unique number on them, and whoever plays the lowest number is going to get the first pick of player count +1 cards, which are face up on the table, which are basically the cards that you can gain into hand. So you want to play low for that reason, but at the same time, you want to play high because the higher number cards actually have better scoring. So you've got a bit of a problem there. And you also want to play in sequence from lowest to highest, because if you play in sequence, you get to pick up these extra cards, which are called sanctuaries, which will always be face up, and they can give you some extra regions or extra scoring goals or extra symbols, and they will always be face up. So even your rightmost card will get to use those for its scoring. So you kind of want to be placing in a sequence from lowest to highest. And there's also kind of these other symbols, which mean you get to pick up more sanctuary cards if you have more of those symbols. And I don't know, I think that's pretty much the game. I didn't explain it particularly well, but I feel like It's pretty
It's
simple.
impossible to explain well. That's the downside of this game. You got to think like Christopher Nolan to explain the game.
So, Shem, what are some things you liked about Faraway?
I think we can all agree that we love the reverse scoring system. It's probably the real highlight of the game. It's not just about how you play them out left to right, it's the right to left thing. So it's a really fun puzzle, and kind of as Sam joked towards there, like it's quite hard to grok on your first play. And it's almost like one of the loves I do like about the game is that you have that, that's how it works, kind of feeling at the end of your first game. And let's play that again because now I understand. So your first play sometimes might feel like a write-off if you don't quite understand the scoring, but it's fast enough to kind of just go again, which is a good thing for the game. So like that scoring thing, I think we can all, nodding heads. We all agree. It's very clever. It's unique as well. Like can't say I've seen that before in a card game where you're playing out the sequence to then do something backwards, and it's like it makes for a really good brain burn challenge as well.
I want to add something because I think there's something quite poetic and beautiful about the scoring, actually. So the scoring is almost half of the game. Like it's not quite half of the game, but it's a good chunk of the game. The game can be played in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And at the end, we all flip our cards over, but we look at one person's tableau. So all our eyes on one person's tableau. And we sort of get to relive their journey. We get to relive that experience of where they've gone. And there's these ooh and ah moments. You flip over a card and everyone's like, oh, you scored that. You scored that 14 points. Wonderful. Or there's those really funny moments when they're like, I thought I had that tag. That's the next card. I got nothing. And they're like 0 points. But we're watching everyone as we score and we feel really engaged and invested in that whole final score process. It's not like the soulless, 3 from this, 4 from this. And everyone just adds up on their own, gets their calculator out, and then we see who won. I'm sure you could do it that way, but I actually really like the moment of us all being invested in each player's journey and kind of applauding them for actually, you made that work. Well done. Very well done.
And that is actually something you miss, like if you play it on BGA. I think it does go through them methodically, but it's on your screen. You don't really get the same feeling. So if you have played this on BGA, that's something you miss from the game, I think, is when you play it in person, like Sam's saying, you do actually go through and it is pretty fun to watch. And just the agony that shows up or the joy of like, oh, it did work. I didn't think it was going to work and it did.
Yeah. Sometimes you surprise yourself.
Yeah. So it's a fun part of the game for sure. And yeah, right. It's the game is fast enough that it doesn't feel like now we get bogged down with scoring because it's actually a moment you can enjoy, which is a pretty rare thing to say for a game, mate, that you can enjoy the scoring process.
Yeah.
They usually are just like, all right, get it done. Who won? Well done. Like, and it's kind of almost a downer in some games to a point.
We're definitely guilty of that. Cough, inventors cough. Anyway, Zach, what are you thinking?
I think one thing that really impresses me about the game is the art and the variety of ways to score that they've managed to put into the art that is like, that fits, that looks good, and it's like part of the art, but it's also a scoring condition. So like there's night and day. So you can score night and day cards, and that's just like the lighting of the piece of art, Like it's not actually extra icons that they need to put on there. There are also icons, but there's, also the colors of the regions. So there's like 4 different region colors. And so that's just like the color of the land, like the land. So how they've got all these different sort of mechanisms for scoring that are just perfectly integrated into like the theme and the art. And I think it's really impressive from like a production point of view, from a design point of view for all the ways of scoring, but also from like how that has been implemented into how the game looks.
Yeah, I do remember seeing a designer diary that the artist did, I think on BGG, probably over a year ago, where they basically dived into their experimentation for the game and the art style they chose. So that was quite an interesting read. If you want to go find it, you can find it. It's out there. Because you're right, it's quite a brave move, but also like unique and interesting way of doing the art style. But it's just, it makes the game pop and stand out. You remember it, right? Like you see the artwork, it's Faraway.
Yeah, so shout out to Maxime Marin, who's the artist, because I think we probably need to give a shout out to the artist on this game as well, because it almost feels like it's part of the design, how that scoring has been worked into the art.
One of the things that I love, like I absolutely love about the design of this game is the tension in the card play, and specifically the tension around playing a high card versus a low card. So if you play a low card, it means that you get to draft early And it means that very likely your next card play is going to get you one of those sweet, sweet sanctuaries. Those sanctuaries are lovely. They are very helpful. They are tags and icons that are considered face up for your whole journey, which is fantastic. So you want to do that, of course. So you're going to play low, right? Except you play low, those cards don't have any scoring on them at all. And if you play low early, your last card, when all of your tags and icons are available, is not going to score anything. And that's the time when you want to be scoring the most points off your whole tableau. So you play a high card, which has a massively high point ceiling, right? And it gives you really good possibilities. But it means you're drafting last. And your next placement is not going to get you a sanctuary at all. And so you're going to try and find these key moments to drop back down and then start up a run of sanctuaries and then drop back down. There's never a perfect play, is kind of what I'm getting at, this tension. There are arguments for playing high. There are arguments for playing low. And that puzzle is just chef's kiss. It is phenomenal. I think it is fantastic. And yeah, hats off to the designers for that tension and reason for playing high versus reason for playing low. Brilliant. So do you guys have any downsides with the game? Are there any things you would change or kind of any things that you don't love about Faraway?
I wouldn't say I don't love, because the game is, like you said, it's quite tight, small game. It's all there for a reason. The only thing that it's not saying it's a bad design, because it's actually more of a feature and it is what makes the game work. But it's those crucial breakpoints in the game where, like, if I just had one more deer icon, that would be 15 points. And that can feel bad in the game where, like, maybe you've got 2 turns to go. You just need that deer, whatever it is. And it just doesn't show up in the draft. Like, there's no deer at all. And that's it, game over kind of thing. So those breakpoints, I think, is what might be a negative. It's not really for me, because I know the game's fast enough to reset and go again, and a loss is not that bad because it's such a short game. If this was a big, long, drawn-out game, then those breakpoints would be probably, like, devastating. You're like, if I just had one more thing, my score would have been so much higher. That's the only thing I can really think of for the game, really, is that it does pivot a lot on the reveal of the cards, and it's, in a sense, you're pushing your luck a little bit at times. So, like, I'm surely one of those icons will show up. Surely I'll get it. And then someone drafts it, or it doesn't show up at all, or whatever it is. So, yeah, that's about all I can really say on the bad side of things.
Do you know what I really have regrets about is that there is an advanced variant that we've never played that I think would be great. It's just really simple. Instead of your starting hand of 3 cards, you get 5 cards and you ditch 2. That just lets you see a little bit more. It lets you plan a little bit better with your starting hand. And I think in all future plays, I'm going to use that. But I haven't done it yet. And I've played this game tons. And I only just saw the advanced variant now. It's like one of those boxes in the rule book that my eyes just completely glazed over.
I haven't played this game as much as Sam or Shem probably. I've been played it 3 times in a row. And so I'd be scraping the bottom of the barrel to really give anything that I didn't like about it, because I have to say I absolutely loved it. But I did wonder if sanctuary cards are a little bit OP. Like, if you can get a lot of them, you can fulfill a lot of contracts for things that you're placing at the end. So, I don't know. Sam's shaking his head, so it's probably not correct. But my final play of it, where I got like a massive score with like heaps of sanctuary cards, I was like, oh, that was actually really easy to fulfill all these contracts. And I was able to like fulfill the color region contracts that I was placing out as like my second to last or last card, which will give me like 10 points for my 7th and 8th card. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe these cards are a bit busted, but they're quite hard to get, and you have to put down no cards and sequence, etc., etc. So yeah, maybe they're not busted. I'm just saying that was just one thought that I had when that happened to me.
Yeah, I think that's the point, is that, like, that maybe they are too strong, but I don't think they are. But if they are, you're in total control about getting them. Like, it's your choice to get them with the cards you play. So no one's stopping you from getting those cards, really. Like you said, you got a hand of 3 cards. You've got a choice to go higher or lower, generally. And unless you've already gone really, really high and you draft nothing but low cards. So it's really your control. So I'm sure from memory I've played games where I've only had 1 or 2 of those and still done okay. And I've had games where I've had way more than that and done okay. So it's really like, it's the scoring things lining up at the right time that matter more. Those things just give you a bit of grace, I think, in a way. Like, they help you fix up where you've made mistakes, but I don't think they're crucial to winning. But even if they were, it's really your own decision to get them or not. So
I'll just say that's a take. That's a take. Yep.
Is it a hot one?
What I think is that they can be OP, but for them to be OP, you need to have a lot of scrolls so that you can pick the one that you need. Because if you're getting sanctuaries every turn and you don't have scrolls and you're just getting the top deck, they can be utter garbage for you. You don't get the deer that you want that Shem's talking about. So there is a strategy around going for sanctuaries, but there are also many other strategies.
Yeah, in that particular game, I think I was picking up 6 cards each time and picking one. So it was quite...
exactly. Yeah, so there's a synergy there around having the scroll cards. So my downside, it's such a nitpick, but BGG, I'm going to say, is wrong. So BGG reckons that this game is best at 2 or 3 players. And I would say I prefer it at 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 players, but maybe that's too many. And the reason for this is that you are dealing out player count plus 1 cards in the general drafting area every round. And I find at 2 player, you just do not get to see many cards at all. And I also think that it sort of makes the drafting, the low card, high card dynamic way too extreme. In 2 player, you could play a 5, and that's the lowest card. That's a really, really low card. There's not many cards lower than 5 if you know normal math. And the other person plays a 4 and your last pick, right? And so I think that the draft is more interesting when there's 5 people in there with a 30, there's a 40 in there, there's a 1, there's more numbers in there. And so the strength of the card is more likely going to matter just because we've got that quantity of players playing. And so I think it makes the draft more interesting. One, that you can see more cards and that you can predict a little more closely how early in the draft you're going to be with this 20 or with this 30 that you play down. So I would say I think it's actually better at higher play count. I didn't love it at 2 as much just because I wanted to see more cards and I wanted to have a little bit more certainty about this low card being low or this high card being high.
So I think we can move on to the final section of talking about these games where we're each going to give a prediction of who we think will win. We're going to say who we would like to win. And also we're going to answer the question, if we were on the jury, who would we pick? So thinking from the perspective of the Kennerspiel and what they... So Sam, you can start us off with your prediction.
So my prediction. So this is going with my head. What I think will win the Kennerspiel Des Jahres in 2025. Oh, I could actually see any of these. There's none that are a hard no that I just don't think will win. I'm changing my mind as I'm about to talk. Yo. I'm going to say Endeavour Deep Sea is going to win. I think there's the whole like eco side of it, that this is a really like eco-conscious product. It's a really wholesome theme. It's a deep strategy game that is very easy to teach, and it's got a lovely production. And I know that the Kennerspiel Des Jahres has leaned lighter in previous years, and so this would be my knock against Endeavour for the prediction. But I think the tide's going to turn. I think the weather's changing, and they're going to start going a little bit heavier. So I'm going Endeavour Deep Sea.
You heard it here first. Maybe not first, but
Zach.
Well, this is going to be boring because I actually decided that was going to be my prediction too. And so mainly for the fact that, it's a game with a theme that people care about. And I think there's the conscious thing around picking themes that are kind of like educational as well and a positive for our planet. And I also think about that thing maybe of them leaning a bit lighter. Like, why did they include Endeavour? Why did they include Endeavour in the nominees where it's like a much heavier game than the other two? Maybe because it's going to win. So that's kind of my conspiracy theory. And so I'm going to pick Endeavour Deep Sea.
Wow.
Wow. So knowing a bit more about Spiel firsthand a little bit, like
that's a nice flex.
There you
nice
go.
flex.
Continue. The Spiel is often like it's about telling the German families which game to buy their kids for Christmas. The Spiel Jahres, the main one, is like, get this game for your kids. The Kennerspiel was like, oh, your little nephew likes playing games, get him this game. So there is this misconception in board game world of that, or the outside of the German market at least, that it's a heavy game award. It's not a heavy game award. It's a gift to buy people who play games. That's basically what it comes down to. And a lot of it comes down to like which game is most marketable for the German market, which game is the right price point, and there's a lot of things going on that we don't really see on the surface. And for that reason, I actually think Loot will probably win because it's very accessible. It's not really like breaking boundaries like crazy. It's a game that anyone who's played a game could pick up and play quite easily. And it's cartoony and fun and approachable. So I am not saying, we'll touch on that soon, but I'm not saying I think it should win, but I think it probably will, just based on what I know of previous Kennerspiels. And they're notorious for basically making the game win that no one thought should win. And not saying it's always the case. There are plenty of good Kennerspiels that have won. But you know, it's a thing, a bit of a meme in the last few years where like people are kind of surprised by who won.
Yeah, that's totally true. It feels like every year when they release the nominees, there's one game where it's like, oh, what is this game? I haven't heard of this game. And there's usually two games that have already become sort of established. And I feel like Loot was that game for me. It was like, what is this game? This game that was nominated? And then we checked it out afterwards. So with all that context in mind, Shem, I think that was actually really helpful saying what the Kennerspiel des Jahres is for. What would you pick if you were on the jury?
I was on the jury. So what do I think should win is I guess the way of saying it. Without any bias or anything like that, what I think deserves to win, I think would be Faraway. Purely because it keeps that accessibility. It's a card game. It's got that great artwork that we talked about, but also it's highly replayable, very accessible. And it's doing new things, right? It's like a unique game. There's no other game that you can really compare it to. Sure, there's plenty of card games that do things with numbers and colors and sets, but the scoring thing is highly unique and like memorable. And I would like to play it again. So I think, I think it should win because of that, because it is quite innovative and interesting. But we'll see.
So my pick for should win, and with the context of what the Kennerspiel des Jahres is about, like what you said, I'm actually going to go Loot, because I had one play of Faraway where I taught some members of my family. I'm not going to name names. I've only got a mum, a dad, and a sister, so I'm not going to name names, but they know who they are. They're not listening to this podcast. It just didn't go down well. It just blew their brain a little too much. They are big fans of Ticket to Ride and like Five Crowns and a bunch of other games. And it made me think that as much as I love Faraway as a design, and I could just wax on about how beautiful I think is the game design, for some people, the concept of scoring backwards and getting those tags was just a little too much. Now, Kennerspiel can be a little heavier, but I think that Loot would be a little more approachable. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think it would be a little more approachable. And so I think that should win. Zach?
It's difficult. Yeah, I think if it's a game for people who like games, though, I like games, and the one I liked the most and the one I played the most times in a row was Faraway. So, and as we were talking about it, I'm like, man, I really want to play that game again. Like, I want to play it right now. And when we're talking about a game on our podcast, and as we're talking about it, I want to play it again, I know that there was a good game. There's a game I like. And I think if we're going to say the approachable game for people who like games, I think this is it. Like, I think, Sam, you taught it to me in like 5 minutes or probably less. And we played it 3 times in a row, and it probably took like, I don't know, less than an hour. I mean, we were only playing 2 players. Yeah, I think it's brilliant. It's easy to grok if you're a gamer and you've seen all that kind of set collection and different ways of scoring before. But then there's a twist on it. So yeah, Faraway.
So the final category would be selfish one. And this might end up being a 3 for 3, we'll find out. But which game would you want to win, Zach? Which game?
Oh, guys.
Maybe it's the same.
I'm gonna not pick the same one as you guys. I'm just gonna pick Faraway again because I just really liked it that much. Endeavour would be there for the patriotism of seeing a Kiwi win the Kennerspiel. But yeah, I just really like Faraway that much, and so that's who I would like to win.
Yeah, I got to go Endeavour Deep Sea. I would be so excited and elated for Jarratt and Carl if they won this award. It's absolutely huge. They are legends, really cool people, and I would be really interested to see what kind of doors that would open up for them with more game designs and all sorts of things. So yeah, look, I just have to go full bias. I'd be so excited if Endeavour Deep Sea won the Kennerspiel.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I'd love to see them win it. It's the nomination itself is huge, but to win a Kennerspiel is a massive boost in just popularity of that game. And yeah, like you said, it would be pretty cool to see what it does for them. Not necessarily always financially, but like the recognition and like the desire to do more games, expand more and do more games, because now they've got their names on a Kennerspiel, which is a big deal. That'd be amazing. So I'm definitely voting for New Zealand to win this one. That would be amazing. So we'll see. I hope you guys are right with your prediction. So
Shem, you went all 3 games, and
Well
it's
done.
an answer to each of the questions. Nice. I like it. I like it.
I know. I think Luke will probably win. I think Faraway probably should, based on what it is, and I really want Deep Sea to win. So.
Thanks for listening to the Lens and Bale podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Garfield Games. You can follow Garfield Games on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, X, and YouTube. You can also subscribe to our newsletter and join the Garfield Discord server.
I have nothing more to add, but I totally agree with you. Yep.
Love it. Love it. I love it when you agree with me.
Yeah. This is the one time this year, so that's it.